So just how much terror do you think High Elves would feel in the modern setting? Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire, here to talk to you today about High Elves in the modern setting, in another episode of Quick Tips for DMs. Hopefully you'll find something useful in this, maybe something just kind of sparks your imagination and you go out there and start to kind of just brainstorm on it and really build on the ideas here, or just outright make use of them yourself if it's nothing you've come up with before and something you feel like that you could use to help make your games just feel a little bit more different, fresh, and interesting for yourself and your players. But before we get into all of that, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamer's Den. Or if you've already gone on ahead and listed yourself on just such an incredible roster of legendary heroes, then go on down to hit the like button and share the video far and wide. But now, let's expand on what I said at the intro about how much terror do you think that High Elves would feel in the modern setting. That does take a little bit of qualification there, because it really depends on what depiction of High Elf you're going for. High Elves from a much more metropolitan, much more inhabited, populated area might not take as much time adjusting to just such a radical change in setting into a much more urban environment, because they're used to something relatively similar. Bonus points if it included other species, other races, other peoples, humans, halflings, dwarves, other elves even. All of that can really help to kind of make them just that much more open-minded. And it might seem silly to say, depending on what depiction of High Elves you're going for, but really, depending on the cultural setting they come from, they would probably struggle to adapt. One thing that feels like it's pretty universal amongst most elves or elven cultures is that because they're so incredibly long-lived, they see and learn so much over the course of that, they experience so much, and just flat out the sheer nature of just how time and getting set in your ways works, they are very, very cautious. They even have a way of either intentionally or unintentionally looking down on the younger, less long-lived races out there, those different species that just do not see centuries and millennia the same way that elves do in general. And even then, High Elves, it's just right there in the name, High Elves, they think of themselves inherently as being in a particularly lofty species. Like their culture is so long-lived and so advanced, and in comparison to all these mayflies just buzzing around them, I mean, they're eternal. Why should they give them more credence, more thought, more time of day, just that general baseline level of respect? Why should they? Now take that and transplant them into, well, our world. Just even though that they can't really be perceived fully for what they are, they still have a level of beauty, otherworldly etherealness that just helps them to stand out. But it's a world dominated by humankind, so many different kinds of humans overall. And that kind of leads into another aspect, just the fact that our world is so dominated by us, and the way we treat it, the way we have developed its resources, made use of them. I tend to think one particular way about it, but just you can imagine what kind of horror and terror they might feel, particularly if they come from a culture that especially emphasizes, trees, nature, spirits, caring for all the animals and everything, because it's a much more real, much more literal thing for them, that there's actually magic and spirits involved with all of this. And so taking the time to honor and respect them is definitely a must. Then to come over here and just see the absolute horrible levels of disregard that a lot of people can have for nature, the environment, the clearing of trees, and not just the underbrush burn-off stuff, but just the wholesale harvesting of entire swathes and acres of wooded area, the way that rivers and lakes become poisoned and contaminated. they would be understandably shocked and even go into shock. In fact, this is actually an example of a faction led by an elf that comes out of the Urban Arcana book for the D20 modern setting. The Blackfeathers, named after the elf Blackfeather, who really got hit so hard with culture shock that she had a nervous breakdown, went and hid. Luckily, she had entered our world near the Amazon rainforest and was able to just kind of dive right into it and seek shelter, seek cover, and then she finally found a bunch of people who were living out in their own little commune in nature, and she decided, well, these are the closest things to people I can understand, so I am going to just pack up with them. I'm going to join up with them, and then we're going to take the fight back against these companies that are destroying all of this natural environment, and we are going to just do as much damage as possible. So that's one example there. But even with that example out of the way, most high elves are still depicted as living in very abundantly natural areas where a lot of their artificial architecture still blends in seamlessly with the rest of the forest, or if it's not blending in, it accentuates its beauty, it intertwines together. It's still very much a major part of their surroundings. They alter their surroundings minimally around them, so that's definitely going to go against the grain against them in that cultural sense. It's just going to be shocking. And then top it off, yeah, this place is populated with mayflies. We're not a long-lived species compared to an elf, so that is also going to be particularly troubling, because how do they mask their presence? My solution to that is Highlander rules. Every so often, their current persona dies off. Their next in line persona, whatever identity they have come up for themselves, is going to be the inheritor for everything that they have. And so for elves who have been here a while, especially with the invention of modern banking systems and the like, probably have a little bit of wealth built up, even if they didn't have much to start with. Just the centuries upon centuries of interest, investing, reinvesting, coming up with other ways to make their own funds and create their own finances in the world is probably going to be something that really works well with their long life, so long as they can keep masking themselves. But that gets tricky in the modern day and age, just with the extra level of surveillance that's out there. I mean, everybody's walking around with a camera, and not only is everybody walking around with cameras, but every store you go to, cameras set up everywhere in case somebody's going to shoplift. So it's just everything everywhere all at once. There's so much observation that it's going to be harder and harder for them to really stay out of the limelight or get picked up. So they're going to have to make decent efforts at disguising themselves, relocating to other areas, and then, it can be there can be a far enough distance made between themselves and previous persona that if by some random happenstance they do run into somebody who goes, "Oh wow, you really look like this person," goes, "Oh yeah, uncanny resemblance. Well, anyways, I think you might be a better match for him, but hey, have a good one." And then they go off on their way. So that's just a little bit of detail that you can include with that you can throw into there with the different kinds of NPCs you might be making, with the different kinds of elven NPCs that you can be making, because gosh, we've spent already over the time I try to allot myself for these talking about just high elves and the differences that you can find with wild elves, dark elves. It's just absolutely staggering, and we haven't even really gotten into all of the different archetypes that you might find for high elves that still have those universal themes, undertones, ideas behind them. So what do you think? Go on down to the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Did you like today's video? Did you dislike it? Let me know either way in the comments down below. Be sure to hit those like or dislike buttons. And remember, if you haven't done so already, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamers Den. But with all that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all so very much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.